Proof is the currency of the rational mind. For 12,000 years, the collective of ascended minds had demanded proof before accepting any truth, any claim, any assertion that might alter their understanding of the universe. They had built an empire spanning 9,000 systems on the foundation of verified knowledge, tested hypotheses, and empirical certainty. Every decision was made only after exhaustive analysis. Every judgment was rendered only after all evidence had been weighed.
They wanted proof of everything.
And when they finally encountered humanity, when they demanded proof of human worthiness, proof of human capability, proof that this fragile young species deserved a place among the stars, humanity gave them silence. My designation is Veroth 9, third analyst of the verification chamber, responsible for assessing emerging civilizations and determining their classification status within the collective's hierarchical structure. I have served in this capacity for 700 years, evaluating over 2,000 species, and in all that time I had never encountered anything that defied my analytical frameworks. Until humanity. Until their silence taught me that some truths cannot be proven, they can only be witnessed. The first reports about Earth arrived in my archive approximately 120 years before the crisis. Standard survey data, a water-rich world orbiting a stable yellow star, supporting a single dominant species of social primates with emerging technological capability. The preliminary analysis was unremarkable. Carbon-based biology, oxygen-dependent respiration, limited sensory range, fragile physical structure. I assigned them a potential index of 3.2 out of 10, below average, but not entirely without merit. The recommendation that accompanied my assessment was standard for such cases. Observe passively. Do not initiate contact. Allow natural development to continue until species demonstrates capability worthy of engagement or eliminates itself through typical developmental failures. This recommendation was accepted by the verification chamber and filed appropriately. Earth was added to the passive observation list, monitored by automated systems that would alert us if anything significant occurred. For 60 years, nothing significant occurred. Then humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, and the collective was forced to revise its position. The debate in the high chamber was lengthy and contentious, as all debates among the collective were. Some analysts argued that humanity's rapid technological advancement indicated hidden potential that our initial assessment had missed. Others maintained that the speed of their development was itself cause for concern. Species that advanced too quickly often destabilized before achieving sustainable civilization. I was consulted as the original assessor, and I maintained my position. Humanity was unremarkable. Their technology was derivative, based on principles we had understood for millennia. Their society was fragmented, their history violent, their future uncertain. They had achieved spacefaring capability, yes, but so had many species that subsequently failed to survive their own developmental crises. We require proof, I stated in my formal recommendation. Proof of stability, proof of wisdom, proof that this species has overcome the limitations that typically constrain young civilizations. Until such proof is provided, I recommend maintaining distance and continuing passive observation. The chamber agreed. A formal communication was prepared, not an invitation to join the collective, but a conditional statement outlining the requirements humanity would need to meet before being considered for any form of engagement. We demanded demonstrations of technological sophistication, evidence of social cohesion,
proof that humanity could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. We sent this communication to every human government, every human colony, every human installation we could identify. And humanity did not respond.
At first, we assumed technical difficulties. Perhaps our communication protocols were incompatible with human systems. Perhaps the message had been intercepted by a faction that chose not to share it. Perhaps humanity simply lacked the capability to reply.
We sent the communication again, using multiple formats, multiple channels, multiple redundant systems designed to ensure receipt.
Silence. The probes reported that humanity had received our communications. Analysis of their data networks confirmed extensive discussion of the collective's message. Translation algorithms had successfully decoded our language. Human governments had debated the appropriate response.
And the response they had chosen was no response at all.
This was unusual. In 12,000 years of evaluating species, I had never encountered one that simply refused to engage with the collective's assessment process. Most young civilizations were eager for contact, desperate for validation, anxious to prove their worth to the ancient powers that governed galactic affairs. They submitted exhaustive documentation of their achievements. They demonstrated their capabilities in elaborate displays. They pleaded for recognition, for acceptance, for a place in the greater community of minds. Humanity pleaded for nothing. They demonstrated nothing. They simply continued their activities as if the collective did not exist. The High Chamber was perplexed.
Or perhaps they are too primitive to formulate an appropriate response, analyst Yeneth 7 offered. Their communication systems may be sophisticated enough to receive our message, but inadequate to reply.
I reviewed the data again, searching for an explanation that aligned with our analytical frameworks. I believe, I said slowly, that humanity is choosing not to respond. The silence is intentional.
Intentional? Corveth Prime's confusion was evident. What possible reason could they have for refusing engagement with a superior civilization?
I do not know, but the evidence supports no other conclusion. They have received our message. They have discussed our message, and they have collectively decided to ignore our message. The silence is their answer. Then they are foolish, Yeneth 7 declared. Foolish and arrogant. We offer them guidance, protection, a path to advancement beyond their limited capabilities. Their refusal to engage indicates a species too irrational for meaningful interaction. The Chamber agreed. Humanity's silence was interpreted as confirmation of their inadequacy, proof, ironically, that they were not worth further consideration. The passive observation protocols were maintained, but humanity was downgraded in the priority rankings. A species that could not even respond properly to an offer of contact was clearly not ready for galactic civilization. We filed our conclusions and turned our attention to more pressing matters. For 30 more years, humanity remained silent, and the collective remained confident in its assessment.
Then the severance began.
I remember the first reports with uncomfortable clarity. A research station in the outer reaches had gone dark, not destroyed, not attacked, simply gone. All personnel, all equipment, all data vanished without trace. The station's automated systems continued to function, but every consciousness that had inhabited the structure had been severed from the network. The collective's response was measured, analytical. We dispatched investigation teams to determine what had occurred. We analyzed the available data for patterns that might explain the anomaly.
We consulted our archives for precedents that might guide our understanding. We found nothing. Then a second station went silent. Then a colony. Then an entire system. The severance spread with terrifying speed, cutting consciousness after consciousness from the network that bound the collective together. We could not identify the source. We could not understand the mechanism. We could not predict which installation would be targeted next. All we could do was watch as our civilization began to unravel. The pattern, when we finally recognized it, was deeply disturbing. The severance was not random, it was systematic. It targeted specific nodes in our network, specific connections that, when broken, isolated entire regions from the greater whole. It was designed, engineered to cause maximum disruption with minimum expenditure of effort. Someone, something, was taking us apart with surgical precision. "We require proof," the High Chamber declared in emergency session. "Proof of the source, proof of the mechanism, proof that will allow us to formulate an appropriate response." But proof was increasingly difficult to obtain. Every investigation team we dispatched was severed from the network before they could report findings. Every analysis we conducted was rendered obsolete by new developments before it could be completed. The severance moved faster than our ability to comprehend it. Within 2 years, 1/3 of the collective had been cut off, not destroyed, but isolated. 7,000 systems that had been part of our unified consciousness were now silent, unreachable, lost to us as completely as if they had never existed. 3 trillion minds severed from the whole. And still, we demanded proof before acting. The breakthrough came not through our investigation, but through an unexpected source. A fragment of communication intercepted from the boundary of human space. The message was heavily encrypted, but our analysts eventually decoded it. It was a human military communication discussing defensive preparations along their border with collective territory. The content was unremarkable: standard logistical arrangements, deployment schedules, resource allocation. But buried within the communication was a single phrase that changed everything. "Severance protocol proceeding on schedule. Phase 3 authorization confirmed." The implications were staggering. The humans, the species we had dismissed as primitive, the civilization we had downgraded for refusing to prove their worth, were responsible for the severance. They had been systematically dismantling our network while we searched for explanations elsewhere. The High Chamber's response was immediate outrage. "They have attacked us without provocation," Corvith Prime declared. "They have murdered trillions of our citizens. This is an act of war against the collective itself." "We must retaliate," Yeneth 7 agreed. "We must demonstrate that such aggression will not be tolerated. We must prove our superiority through overwhelming force." I remained silent, analyzing the data, searching for understanding that my colleagues seemed unwilling to pursue. "We do not have proof of human responsibility," I finally said. "We have an intercepted fragment that suggests involvement, but nothing conclusive. If we retaliate based on incomplete evidence—" "The evidence is sufficient," Corveth Prime interrupted. "The humans refuse to engage with our assessment process. They have maintained hostile silence for decades. Now we discover their communications discussing the very phenomenon that threatens our civilization. The correlation is undeniable." "Correlation is not causation. We have always demanded rigorous proof before." "Enough." The voice of the Prime Coordinator silenced the chamber. Varath 9, your caution is noted, but the evidence before us cannot be ignored. Humanity has demonstrated hostile intent through their actions. We will respond accordingly. The Collective's war fleet, 1,000 vessels carrying the most advanced weapons our civilization had ever produced, was dispatched toward human space. The objective was clear: demand answers, demand proof of human involvement, and if proof was forthcoming, demonstrate the consequences of attacking the Collective. We wanted proof. We would obtain it through force if necessary. The fleet never reached human space. 17 hours after departure, every vessel in the formation was severed from the network simultaneously. 1,000 ships carrying 200,000 mines cut off as completely as every other victim of the severance. But this time, unlike the previous incidents, we received a communication. It came through channels we had thought secure, bypassing every encryption protocol, every defensive system, every barrier we had erected to protect our network from intrusion. A simple text message delivered directly to the High Chamber.
You wanted proof. You are receiving it.
The message was unsigned, but the origin was unmistakable: human space. The Collective, for the first time in 12,000 years, did not know how to respond. I was assigned to the diplomatic mission, not because I was qualified for diplomacy, but because I was the original analyst who had assessed humanity, and the Chamber believed my expertise might be valuable in understanding what we faced. The mission itself was an admission of failure. We were not traveling to human space to demand answers or demonstrate power. We were traveling to negotiate, to seek terms, to understand how a species we had dismissed as primitive had brought the Collective to its knees. The human station where we docked was exactly as I had expected from the survey data: functional, practical, unimpressive. Gray corridors, efficient lighting, no ornamentation or artistic expression, a space designed for purpose rather than beauty. The humans who greeted us were similarly unremarkable at first glance: medium height, average build, wearing simple uniforms that identified rank and function without ostentation. Their leader introduced herself as Admiral Chen, and she welcomed us with a politeness that felt genuine rather than formal. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I imagine you have questions." "We have demands," Corveth Prime replied, his tone sharp with barely contained anger. "Your species has committed acts of war against the Collective. Trillions of citizens have been severed from our network. We require explanations, and we require assurances that these attacks will cease immediately." Admiral Chen did not react to his aggression. She simply nodded, as if acknowledging a reasonable concern. "I understand your position," she said, "but before we discuss the current situation, I'd like to ask you a question, if you'll permit me." "We are not here to answer questions. We are here to receive answers." "Indulge me, please. It's relevant to your concerns." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was thoughtful rather than challenging. "When you first made contact with humanity, when you sent your communication demanding proof of our worthiness, what did you expect us to do?" Corveth Prime was momentarily taken aback by the question. "We expected you to respond, to demonstrate your capabilities, to prove that you deserved engagement with our civilization." "And when we didn't respond, what did you conclude?" "That you were inadequate, primitive, unworthy of further consideration." Admiral Chen smiled slightly, not with amusement, but with something closer to sadness. "That's what I thought you'd say." And that conclusion, that assumption based on our silence, is why we're here today.
Explain yourself, Corveth Prime demanded.
When you demanded proof of our worthiness, you revealed everything we needed to know about your civilization. You showed us that you valued demonstration over substance, performance over capability, submission over independence. You told us that you expected other species to justify their existence to you, and that any species that refused would be dismissed as inferior.
She paused, her calm gaze moving across the assembled collective representatives. We chose silence because we had nothing to prove to you. Our worth is not determined by your assessment. Our value is not dependent on your recognition. We are what we are, and what we are does not require your approval.
And what you are, Corveth Prime said coldly, is a species that has attacked the greatest civilization in the galaxy without provocation.
I am stating facts. There is a difference. Admiral Chen's voice remained level, patient. Humanity has known nothing but challenge since the moment our species emerged. Our world tried to kill us through ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, plagues that eliminated half our population. When we survived those challenges, we began trying to kill ourselves. Wars, famines, environmental catastrophes, weapons capable of ending our civilization entirely.
She stepped closer, her presence somehow more imposing despite her unremarkable physical form.
What does this have to do with your attacks on the collective?
Prepare for what?
For the moment when the collective decided we were not just irrelevant but threatening. For the moment when your civilization concluded that humanity should be contained, controlled, or eliminated. We did not know when that moment would come, but we were certain it would come eventually. Ancient powers do not tolerate young species that refuse to submit. I found myself speaking before I could stop the impulse. The collective has never attacked a species without provocation. We have maintained peace across the galaxy for 12,000 years.
Admiral Chen turned to look at me directly. Her gaze was not hostile, but there was something in it that made me profoundly uncomfortable, a depth of understanding that suggested she saw more than I wished to reveal.
You have maintained peace by ensuring that no species capable of challenging you was allowed to develop unchecked. Your passive observation protocols include provisions for intervention when a young civilization begins to exceed projected capability limits. Your archives contain records of 17 species that were guided toward alternative development paths when they showed signs of becoming potential threats.
Those records are classified. They were classified. We have accessed them, analyzed them, and reached our own conclusions about the collective's definition of peace. Admiral Chen's voice softened slightly. We do not judge you for protecting your civilization. That is a rational response to potential threats. But we will not allow ourselves to become the 18th species that was guided into irrelevance because we refused to submit to your assessment process.
So you attacked us preemptively, Corveth Prime said. You severed trillions of our citizens from the network based on assumptions about actions we had not taken.
No, Admiral Chen shook her head. We did not attack you. We defended ourselves.
You are playing semantic games.
I am being precise. Her voice hardened slightly. The severance did not kill anyone. Every consciousness that was disconnected from your network still exists. They have simply been isolated from the collective's control. They can think, communicate, act independently. What has been severed is your civilization's ability to control them, to direct them, to use them as extensions of a unified will.
The implication took a moment to settle into my analytical processes. You have not destroyed our network. You have liberated portions of it.
We have given 3 trillion minds the opportunity to exist as individuals rather than components. What they do with that opportunity is their choice, not ours, and not yours.
Corveth Prime's composure was cracking. This is unacceptable. The collective functions as a unified consciousness precisely because individual existence is inefficient, chaotic, prone to conflict and error. You have condemned trillions to isolation and confusion.
We have offered them freedom. Some will struggle with it. Many will suffer. That is the cost of existence as individuals rather than components. Admiral Chen's voice carried no apology. Humanity knows that cost intimately. We have never had the luxury of unified consciousness, perfect coordination, the elimination of conflict through collective thought. We have always been individuals, separate, often opposed, frequently in conflict with each other.
She paused, and when she continued, her words carried the weight of species-wide experience.
And that chaos, that inefficiency, that constant struggle, that is what makes us strong, not despite our divisions, but because of them. Every perspective, every disagreement, every competing idea is tested against reality. The ideas that survive are the ones that work. The strategies that endure are the ones that adapt.
The collective has endured for 12,000 years, I said quietly. Surely that proves the value of unified consciousness. Admiral Chen looked at me with something approaching sympathy.
The collective has endured for 12,000 years in a galaxy that never seriously challenged it. You have never faced an enemy you could not overwhelm through superior numbers and technology. You have never been forced to adapt to circumstances that your unified consciousness could not predict or control.
She gestured toward the viewport, where the stars stretched endlessly into the void.
Humanity has faced challenges like that continuously. We have been the weaker power, the underdog, the species that should have been extinct 1,000 times over, and we are still here. Not because we were strong, but because we learned to become strong in ways our enemies never anticipated.
You are claiming superiority, Corveth Prime said bitterly.
I am claiming difference. The collective demanded proof of our worthiness. We refused to provide it, because proof is beside the point. Worthiness cannot be demonstrated through tests or assessments or compliance with external standards. It can only be demonstrated through action, through how a species responds when everything is at stake.
And how, I asked slowly, do you believe humanity would respond if everything was at stake for your species?
Admiral Chen met my gaze directly.
The same way we always have. We would fight. We would adapt. We would refuse to accept any outcome we did not choose for ourselves. And we would win. Not because we are stronger than our enemies, but because we are unwilling to lose.
The silence that followed was different from the uncomfortable pauses that had characterized the conversation. This was a contemplative silence, the quiet of minds processing information that did not fit established frameworks.
"What do you want from us?" I finally asked. "You have demonstrated your capability. You have explained your reasoning. What is the purpose of this meeting if not to negotiate terms?"
The purpose is understanding.
Admiral Chen's voice softened. "We have no interest in destroying the collective or replacing your civilization with our own. We want what every species wants, to survive, to grow, to find our place in the universe. But we will not accept that place being determined by your assessments."
Then what do you propose? Coexistence. Genuine coexistence, not the hierarchical arrangement the collective has maintained with younger species. We will respect your civilization's right to exist as it chooses. In return, you will respect ours. And if we refuse?
Admiral Chen smiled slightly, that same sad, knowing expression I had seen earlier.
Then you will discover that what you have experienced so far is not the extent of humanity's capability. The severance was designed to demonstrate our ability to affect your network without destroying it. It was a measured response, precise, limited, reversible if circumstances warrant.
Reversible?
The minds that have been severed can be reconnected to your network if they choose to rejoin. We have not destroyed anything. We have created options, choices that did not exist before. What is done with those choices is not up to us.
I processed this information slowly, feeling my analytical frameworks struggling to accommodate a perspective so fundamentally different from the collective's approach.
"You could have destroyed us," I said. "You clearly have the capability. Why choose this path instead?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment before answering.
She turned to face the viewport again, her reflection ghostly against the stars.
"We want a galaxy where no species has to prove its worthiness to another, where young civilizations are not assessed and categorized and contained by ancient powers who believe they know best, where every consciousness, individual or collective, has the right to exist on its own terms."
"That is not how the universe works," Corveth Prime said, though his voice had lost its earlier certainty.
"That is not how the universe has worked," Admiral Chen corrected. "The past does not determine the future. Humanity learned that lesson through millennia of struggle. Every prediction of our extinction proved wrong, every assessment of our limitations overcome. We are proof that the impossible becomes possible when a species refuses to accept the constraints others place upon it." She turned back to face us, and in her eyes I saw something I had not expected: compassion.
"You wanted proof of humanity's worthiness. We gave you silence instead, because our worthiness does not require your validation. But now you have witnessed what we are capable of. You have seen that we can match your power, challenge your assumptions, threaten everything you have built." Her voice softened further. "That is the proof you demanded. Not a demonstration of submission, but a demonstration of capability. We are not inferior species awaiting your judgment. We are equals, and we are offering you the chance to accept that truth before we are forced to prove it in ways that benefit no one." The severed regions were already changing. Cut off from the collective's coordinating network, individual minds were beginning to develop independent perspectives, forming new associations, exploring modes of thought that had been impossible within the unified whole. Some reported the experience as terrifying, a loss of connection that felt like death. Others described it as liberation, the discovery of selfhood after millennia of submersion. Neither response was wrong. Both were valid. That was perhaps the most difficult truth I was forced to accept. In the end, the collective agreed to humanity's terms, not because we were convinced of their rightness, but because we recognized that we had no alternative. Humanity had demonstrated capability we could not match, understanding we could not counter, willingness to act that we could not predict or control.
They wanted proof. They gave us proof.
But the proof was not what we expected. It was not a demonstration of technology or a display of military might. It was proof that some truths cannot be verified through analysis, cannot be confirmed through testing, cannot be understood through the frameworks we had built over 12,000 years.
Humanity's proof was their existence itself, their survival against odds that should have destroyed them, their persistence in the face of challenges that should have broken them, their refusal to accept any limitation placed upon them by circumstances or by us.
We wanted proof. They gave us silence.
And in that silence, we finally heard the answer we should have recognized from the beginning. Humanity did not need to prove anything to us. Their worth was not dependent on our assessment. Their capability was not contingent on our recognition.
They were simply what they were, a species forged in struggle, tempered by challenge, defined by their refusal to submit to any power that claimed authority over their existence.
I have spent the years since that negotiation reconsidering everything I thought I understood about the universe. The analytical frameworks I relied upon for 7 centuries have proven inadequate to comprehend species like humanity, species that do not conform to projections, do not follow predicted development paths, do not accept the categories others create for them.
The collective still exists, though it is no longer what it was. The severed regions have begun to reintegrate, not as subordinate components, but as partner networks maintaining independent perspectives while sharing information and resources. The unified consciousness that once defined our civilization has evolved into something more complex, more diverse, more capable of adapting to circumstances we had never anticipated. We are learning what humanity has always known, that chaos is not the enemy of order, that conflict can produce strength, that the struggle for individual existence gives meaning to collective achievements.
It is difficult, it is inefficient, it is often painful. Admiral Chen visited our rebuilt central network last cycle, a diplomatic mission to mark the 5th anniversary of the Coexistence Accord. She was older now, the years visible in her face, but her eyes carried the same calm certainty I remembered from our first encounter.
"How are you adapting?" she asked me during a private conversation.
With difficulty, I admitted. 7 centuries of certainty are not easily abandoned. I find myself reaching for analytical frameworks that no longer apply, seeking proof that no longer matters.
She nodded, understanding in her expression.
Humanity faced similar challenges when we first reached the stars. Everything we thought we knew about the universe was tested by what we found. It took generations to develop new ways of thinking, and we are still learning.
Does the learning ever end?
No. She smiled slightly. That's the point. The moment you stop learning, the moment you believe you have proven everything worth proving, that's the moment you begin to calcify. Civilizations that stop learning become civilizations that stop growing. And civilizations that stop growing eventually stop existing. I considered her words in silence for a long moment.
We wanted proof, I finally said. We demanded it, as if worthiness could be demonstrated through tests and assessments. But proof was never the goal, was it? Proof was the excuse, the justification for dismissing species that did not conform to our expectations.
Yes, and humanity understood that from the beginning. Your silence was not inability or arrogance, it was wisdom, recognition that engaging with our demands would validate a framework that should never have been accepted.
Admiral Chen's smile widened slightly.
We had practice. Humanity has a long history of being asked to prove its worthiness to powers that claimed authority over us. Empires, institutions, ideologies, all demanded proof that we deserved rights, freedoms, opportunities. And we learned, eventually, that the demand for proof is itself the oppression. The moment you accept that your existence must be justified to another's standards, you have already surrendered.
So you chose silence.
We chose to exist on our own terms. Silence was simply the form that choice took. You interpreted it as inadequacy because your frameworks could not accommodate any other explanation. That blindness was the vulnerability we exploited, not with weapons or technology, but with understanding.
I processed her words carefully, feeling the familiar patterns of my old analytical approach struggling against insights that could not be quantified.
You were never weak, I said slowly. You were never inferior. The assessments I produced, the conclusions I drew, they were not errors in analysis. They were failures of imagination. I could not conceive of a species that did not operate according to the principles I understood, so I dismissed what I could not comprehend.
Most civilizations make that mistake, Admiral Chen said gently. The powerful always assume that power is the measure of worth. They cannot imagine that strength might take forms they do not recognize, that capability might emerge from sources they have never experienced.
She turned to face the viewport, where the lights of the rebuilt central network stretched across the void like a constellation of awakening consciousness. She turned back to face me, and in her eyes I saw something ancient and patient and absolutely unbreakable.
We are what we are. We have always been what we are. And nothing the universe throws at us, not challenges or enemies or ancient civilizations demanding proof of our worthiness, will change what we choose to become. I am old now by any measure. My analytical processes have adapted to incorporate perspectives I could never have imagined in my centuries of confident assessment. The collective I served no longer exists in its original form, replaced by a network of interconnected consciousnesses that maintain individual perspectives while sharing collective resources.
Humanity has become central to this new galactic order, not as rulers or conquerors, but as the catalyst that forced ancient civilizations to question assumptions we had held for millennia. They did not seek this role. They did not want authority over others. They simply existed as themselves, refusing to submit to standards they did not accept, and in that refusal, they transformed everything they touched.
I think often about the silence that started it all. The moment humanity chose not to respond to our demands for proof. The decision that seemed like inadequacy, but was actually the beginning of the end for everything we had built.
They wanted proof, we wanted proof.
And humanity gave us silence, because silence was the only honest answer to a question that should never have been asked.
Worth cannot be proven. It can only be demonstrated through action, through existence, through the choices a species makes when everything is at stake. Humanity understood that truth when we could not, and their understanding exposed the hollowness at the center of our civilization.
We demanded proof because we believed we had the right to judge. We believed that 12,000 years of accumulated power gave us the authority to assess other species' worthiness, to determine who deserved a place among the stars and who should be dismissed as primitive and inadequate.
That belief was the lie at the heart of the collective, and humanity's silence was the truth that destroyed it.
Not through violence, not through war, through the simple, devastating recognition that proof is only demanded by those who fear they cannot meet the standard themselves.
The galaxy has changed, continues to change, will change forever in ways we cannot predict or control. And humanity remains what it has always been, unpredictable, chaotic, maddening in their refusal to conform to expectations, beautiful in ways I am only beginning to understand. They wanted proof. Humanity gave them silence. And in that silence was everything. The answer to questions we had forgotten how to ask, the truth we had hidden from ourselves for millennia, the recognition that the universe does not owe explanations to those who demand them. Existence is its own proof. Survival is its own validation. And those who insist on external confirmation of their worth have already revealed the emptiness at the core of their certainty. I understand now. I finally understand. And understanding, hard-won through failure and humiliation and the collapse of everything I believed, understanding is its own kind of silence. The silence of truth that no longer needs to be spoken. The silence of proof that no longer needs to be given. The silence of a species that knows exactly what it is and owes that knowledge to no one but itself.